Well, thank you. After all that, thanks, Bob, and thanks to all you for making this such an incredible event and taking the time to come here. I've really been looking forward to speaking here for a number of reasons. One of them is because I wanted to recharge you with new information and new perspectives and encourage you to use this to empower others to make that change to a fully plant-based diet. If not for themselves, then at least consider doing it for the planet. I'm also going to be taking a look at some hot topics, such as the use of the word sustainable and even the Go Meatless on Monday campaign and many, many others. So let's start right off with a photo, shall we? All right, so how many here have been to Brazil? Just a quick show of hands. Great. All right, good to know. Could be business or pleasure, doesn't really matter. All right, so this photo, that's not Brazil. That has nothing to do with Brazil. Okay. So, no, sorry. I do that all the time. I'm just thinking about taking a research trip there myself in the next few months, and I just really wanted to check in with everybody. So thanks for that. Okay, well, back to the photo. Well, what do you see in this photo? I mean, without reading too much into it, one would typically see beautiful blue skies, green grass, rolling hills, things like that, right? Well, we're going to come back to this a bit later and take a much closer look at it. So what I'd like you to do right now is just make a little mental imprint of it and kind of tuck it away. Well, I stopped eating animals and animal products nearly 40 years ago when I was in graduate school, primarily from a health and wellness standpoint, but also because of the animal research I was doing at that time. And yes, you heard that right. That was a 4 with a little 0 after it. There's no need to do the math, get the calculators out in terms of my age. Now, I still do quite a bit of animal research, but now it's related to the effect of our food choices. Now it's more of this type of animal research, perhaps in a jungle or a remote area, getting a better grasp on what sustainability really does in fact mean. So now it's more of this type of research as well. It's some of the largest dairy operations in the world. And these, grass-fed or pastured livestock operations here in the U.S. and overseas, this happens to be in the U.K., or farms like these. We certainly can't leave fish out of the equation now, can we? Yeah, and I'm always undercover here, of course, trying to balance the emotions between being sad, angry, and frustrated all at the same time. And then there's some of my favorite research of all time, which is this. At our rescue operations back in Michigan, I have to admit things have changed quite a bit over the years regarding my work with animals. I became so concerned about the effect of our food choices that I developed some organic vegan food products, a food production business, some enlightenment protocols, and even a couple of healthy fast food restaurants. Basically anything I could do to help improve the health of our planet with respect to food, while I was lecturing along the way, because I realized very early on that it really all begins with education, and not just mine, but everyone's. Well, we're going to examine the word sustainable pretty carefully today, because recently it's been morphed into so many different meanings to suit so many different needs, and it's the latest buzz. Now, I found that the word sustainable for most people refers to our energy sector. How many miles per gallon of gas your car can achieve, how many energy-efficient light bulbs you can switch out to save electricity, and to waste, how, what, when to recycle, or the next step up into composting. Often we think of economic sustainability, but in most areas of the world, no one really knows much about, and they don't really care to hear or talk about what effect our food or their food has on our environment. And that's because they're unaware. They're unaware, and they're pretty comfortable being that way, despite the enormous effect. It's simply too challenging for everybody, isn't it? Culturally, socially, economically. I call it global depletion, the loss of our primary resources on Earth, as well as our own health. It's still sustainability. I just think we need to hear it from a different direction, and we need to hear the whole story through an unfiltered lens. So how many here are familiar with Michael Pollan's work, or Mark Bittman, or Jamie Oliver? Yeah, about the industrialization of food. Sure, high fructose corn syrup, important? Yeah, but these are just fragments of the picture. We need to move beyond all that, well beyond that, and understand the entire picture, the sustainability of our planet, our resources, and ourselves. And to do this, we always need to include topics such as loss of biodiversity, world hunger, sustainability of our own health, water scarcity, agricultural land use inefficiencies, and the state of our oceans and fish. It's a very long and potentially daunting list, isn't it? But you know what? They're all affected. All right, with food choice, or life in general, I think the key to understanding or solving a problem really begins with recognition that there is indeed a problem to solve. So maybe we should view the Earth as one of us, treat it as a patient, For instance, none of us are aware of our planet's cholesterol levels or cardiovascular condition, are we? And certainly most of us are not aware or even concerned about the increasing size of Earth's cancerous tumor or its sudden loss of weight. How about the failing lungs of our planet? Are we aware of those on a daily basis? Or the traumatic and permanent loss of one of our planet's fingers or arms or legs? Things that we may never see again. The Javan and the Tasmanian tiger are already gone. And then there's the mental status. Are we aware of the severe psychosis our Earth is struggling with? See, the answer to all that is no. I mean, we're not aware. Unfortunately, there are no annual checkups, and information about our planet's health hasn't been managed very well, and hasn't been related correctly to our choice of foods. It's never a good idea to cover these things up. Once we're better able to communicate the reality of the state of our planet, the global depletion caused by our choice of foods, and once awareness levels are raised, well, then solving these issues and creating a truly healthy planet becomes easier, doesn't it? Just like the patient. The story begins with these two numbers. There are 6.9 billion people living on our planet today, and control of the growth of our population is an issue, but it's not nearly so much of a problem as the number on the right, what we're doing to the planet. The number on the right represents the fact that there are more than 70 billion animals living on our planet that we raise and eat for food each year, and it repeats itself year after year in growing numbers, and that's the problem. In fact, this 70 billion number is quite impossible, and I use that word correctly. It's quite impossible to pin down, because on any given day, you may find up to 1.7 trillion chickens or 1 to 2 trillion fish in the world on their way sooner or later going off to slaughter. Let's look at a graphic about global depletion then. Certainly there are other industries that contribute to this picture, but none have the comprehensive impact. And just how serious is this depletion? Well, very. In some cases, it's irreversible and spiraling downward quickly. All of these systems that you see are affected. Simply put, we're demanding more of our planet's resources than what it can supply. It would take 1.5 to 2 full Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet. And most of this is due to our choice of foods. It's serious enough on its own merit, but it's made much more so because of all the layers and layers of various influences that tend to bury the problem and bury its solutions. We just don't want to deal with it. We can put every other major problem in the world at the top of the list to fix, except for this one. And yet, this is the world. Now, what's critical for everyone to understand is that this isn't just a factory farm issue. It's a raising animals to eat issue. Let's refine our thoughts about global warming then. Certainly we need to remember that global warming is just one component of the much larger and more insidious problem of global depletion, the more total effect we have on our planet. And the most important thing anyone could do about global warming or global depletion is to take a good look at what's on their plate, of course, specifically all foods derived from fish and livestock. And yes, that would have to include dairy. Instead of 20%, as the original 2006 United Nations report stated, a number of researchers have now found that livestock can produce as much as 51% of all greenhouse gases found in our atmosphere, mostly created by the respiratory carbon dioxide that they didn't account for in that first report, and by the methane production by all these billions and billions of animals themselves, not due to confinement or as a byproduct of factory farming methods. And regardless of where the exact number resides, somewhere between 20 and 51%, I mean, it's huge. It's huge, and the general public needs to know this. I mean, everyone certainly knows the ecological benefits of driving a Prius, right? But very few have the same concern about eating a steak or fish or chicken. Now, a perfect example about how this information has been suppressed occurs every single year during our climate change summits, held originally in Kyoto with its 1997 Kyoto Protocol, and most recently in December in Cancun, where countries have come together and they're trying to solve this global warming problem, but none of this is being addressed. It's very important for them and everyone else to understand that it won't matter how many light bulbs are changed out, and it won't matter how many hybrid cars there are on the road if we don't first change out the way we eat. Well, interspersed throughout our discussions today, you're going to hear and see a few themes. One theme is how this information about this particular subject has been suppressed, even mismanaged, so much so that objectives of many important meetings like Kyoto are not being met. And that all begins with the words we use, I think. I mean, how clear are they? Are they conveying reality? Well, let's look at the word food, for instance, since that's the topic of the weekend, right? Well, my definition of the word food is that which is consumed to ultimately support life. I mean, many people find many different reasons to eat food, and too much of it. We all know that. But it's ultimately to support life, isn't it? So knowing that, therefore, animals are not food. Well, they're not food unless you choose to eat them, and even then, they really don't fit the definition, do they, to support life? Animals are, in fact, while they're animals, they're also not meat, as we all know. Meat, I found, is a term contrived and used by humans to obscure the reality of what they choose to put in their mouths. I mean, think about it. In fact, now there's so many subterms and cute words for this meat category, for almost every type of meat, that you actually lose track of what you're eating, certainly where it came from or what resources it took to produce it. So let me explain. Picture yourself at lunchtime, just about anywhere in the U.S. other than maybe right here, of course. And if you turn to the person on your right and you ask them what they're eating, and they happen to be eating a cylindrical, encased mishmash of various animal parts called a hot dog. Okay, and you ask them what they're eating, well, the response is going to be, I'm eating a hot dog. What do you think I'm eating? Well, what exactly do they mean by that? They're eating a hot dog. Well, are they eating this? No, I don't think so. And yet, he's a really good-looking dog. I mean, he's a hot dog, right? I mean, I think so. No, what they're really eating is the cute guy on the right here who's finally found someone nice to take a snooze with. That's what they're eating. They're eating a pig, or at least parts of a pig. And yet you'd never hear that from them. If you ask them what they're eating a hot dog, they never respond by saying, I'm eating this pig, or I'm eating this pig's leg. Of course, they just wouldn't say that. And yet, if you turn to the person on your left, and they happen to be eating an apple, and you ask them that very same question, so, hey, dude, what are you eating over there? Well, their response is going to be, I mean, first of all, man, don't call me dude. And I hate that. And secondly, more importantly, they're going to say, I'm eating an apple. It's just straight up, isn't it? Interesting thing to think about. And another term of many that I hear every single day that's constantly used improperly, if not abused, is this. What's this? It's a protein, perhaps a rudimentary protein, but when you're thinking about eating protein, this is what you should be thinking about, as in, I need to get my protein today, right? Protein is not the guy on the left here. No, and yet that's what people are calling protein, right? The guy on the left with the overzealous smooch and the excessive amount of saliva that he always has, well, he's a cow. I mean, he shouldn't be called protein. He shouldn't be called protein any more than the guy on the right, and yet we do. In fact, his name is Plato. And what about this phrase? Okay, 15 million or more people recently heard Ted Danson proclaim his love of fish on Earth Day and every day since, and yet he eats them. No offense to Mr. Danson, please, but for him and 97% of all other individuals in the world, this phrase, I love fish, actually means this. I love to eat fish, doesn't it? That's what he really means. I mean, if he loved fish, as in loving his cat or his dog, he certainly wouldn't kill and eat them, would he? No, I don't think so. Again, it's how we use our words, isn't it? So let's take a proper and more accurate look at our oceans. Fish, as well as dairy, are always the last stronghold someone has as they move away from eating animals. We all need to know that. And it's easy to see why, because both are pretty far out of sight, and they just end up on your plate somehow, sort of mysteriously. Well, incredibly large amounts of sea life are taken from our oceans in three ways. First, they're taken as target fish, the one you want to eat. Next, they're also taken out of our oceans to feed other fish grown on factory fish farms, part of the aquaculture movement. And lastly, fish are taken as bykill due to the first two types of fishing. Oh my goodness, well, that doesn't leave too much in our oceans, does it? In fact, our oceans are being ravaged, and yet everyone we know still eats fish. Fragile, interdependent, and poorly understood ecosystems have been devastated. 106 million tons of fish were caught in 2009, with quite a few more hundreds of millions of tons of bykill, which are all those other innocent sea life caught and killed and discarded in the process of trying to catch that targeted fish everyone's asking for. Bykill includes juvenile fish, they'll never see their way to maturity, all seven of the endangered sea turtles, sea lions, birds, dolphins, even whales. I mean, come on. Is that really worth it? I mean, that's embarrassing. Of the 17 major fishing stock areas in the world, all of them are either overexploited or on the verge of collapse. 80% of the world's fish species are affected, considered heavily depleted from overfishing practices. Well, that's quite a bit of damage, but along comes the word sustainable to justify continued harvesting. We can stamp that word now on anything, and then we can continue in the take mode, and we can feel good about it. Why? Well, because it's sustainable. And, I mean, how's that word even used in the fishing industry? I mean, who defines it? Who monitors it? And who decides on enforcement? And if you look at this carefully, or even not so carefully, the real answer is no one. And I say real answer because now there's sea life caught and labeled sustainable when in fact it's not. But it's still labeled as such by a number of highly respected organizations such as the Marine Stewardship Council and others. And there are many, many examples we could talk about: tuna, cod, pollock, haddock, salmon, krill. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch has lobster from the Gulf of Maine, both Canada and U.S. waters, listed as a good alternative. It's not. It's not a good alternative for many reasons: rapidly declining number of lobster, inefficient trapping mechanisms, and most importantly is what I think is the very sad effect lobster trapping has on the endangered North Atlantic right whale. There are only 325 of these magnificent creatures left that we haven't killed. And nearly all of them, 75% of them or more, are getting entangled and injured in those darn trap lines. We owe these whales much more than this. And the same is true with everything on this list. All are considered and labeled sustainable, but none of them really are. And the list goes on and on and on. Cod were fished only 1% of their original numbers off the coast of Newfoundland and to near extinct status in the North Sea. Cod are now by-kill. I mean, who would have thought of that? Sure, cod enjoy swimming with other fish, like haddock and pollock, that are being harvested heavily. In 2007, researchers realized that cod by-kill totaled more than 50,000 tons per year, which happens to be double their quota amount. So they were killing and throwing overboard twice as many cod as by-kill than what was allowed by going after cod itself. It's pretty much a mess. In the case of hoki, the new great white fish used by McDonald's in their fish sandwich, now because we've decimated the cod species, which used to be everyone's favorite fish sandwich. You know, when you run out of one fish, what do? Well, you just go after the next one. But catching hoki causes significant trawling damage, obvious loss of their own numbers. They keep dropping the quota amount, and the killing of thousands and thousands of seabirds and sea lions each year. So why are they calling that sustainable? Just a moment. Someone would like to say something to you. All eyes on the screen, please. I love that movie. It's a shame that no one really listened to its message. The endangered western stellar sea lion in the Aleutian Islands lost over 50% of its already endangered population just in the last couple of years, since 2003, because of fishing operations there that were considered sustainable when in reality it took away the food supply of the very few endangered sea lions that are left. I mean, Happy Feet knows all about this. Why can't we get it figured out? We're even killing and eating the intelligent, talented octopus, which is considered sustainable, especially if it's from Japan. Yeah, octopus can be found at Whole Foods, considered our gold standard, everywhere. Why are we eating octopus? I mean, we don't even understand them. Quite beautiful, aren't they? They really are. Okay, well, and everyone in the world knows about bluefin tuna, right? Yeah, so why do I have to say anything about it? Well, let's see. Their numbers have dropped by 92%. They are already extinct in the Black and Caspian Seas, predicted to become extinct in the Mediterranean region by the end of next year, just 2012. Well, we still kill and eat them. And we still kill and eat other fish that impact them. Well, why is that? The ruling to not grant an endangered status to bluefin tuna was made just a few months ago in May. And it was based primarily on interviews of the tuna fishing industry itself, asking bluefin tuna fishermen, these guys right here, asking them a series of questions to see what they think about taking away their income, their food, and what they like to do for fun on weekends. That was brilliant. That was a brilliant idea. Hence, no endangered status for bluefin tuna. What's the most abundant animal species on Earth? Well, that's a clue. Krill. Yeah, krill. Very good. A very cute 6-centimeter long invertebrate. They feed on phytoplankton. They're a very important part of the oceanic food cycle. But krill numbers have dropped by 78% since 1980, in turn affecting the decline of certain penguin species. However, the quota for killing krill has been placed at 1.5 million tons per year. But krill are also eaten by baleen whales, such as blue, right, and fin, who are desperately trying to make a comeback. Since there are hundreds of thousands less of these great whales due to us slaughtering them all off over the last 200 years, the fishing industry feels there should be more krill for us to eat. Coral reefs are in serious trouble. Most would think it's due to pollution and climate change, right? But the primary cause of coral reef death throughout the entire Caribbean region, anyway, is not pollution and it's not climate change. It's from overfishing. And Alaskan pollock have been harvested at a rate of 3 million tons per year. and it's still labeled as sustainable. I mean, who would think you could take 3 million tons of any species from anywhere and think they wouldn't be missed? So here's the point regarding our oceans. It's no longer a problem about overfishing. No, not at all. It's about fishing. What we need is complete and immediate restoration of all oceanic ecosystems back to a balanced state where pluses and minuses occur naturally, not controlled and manipulated by our wants or by an organization such as MSC that are influenced by money, which they all are. We want to eat lobster or Alaskan pollock, so therefore they're sustainable. Well, no worries. Nope, not to worry, because now we have fish farms. 47% of all fish consumed worldwide are produced from aquaculture, which is growing faster than any other food sector. And one reason for this tremendous growth is the very false illusion of environmentalism. I mean, here we have another interesting idea where fish are caught in our already ravaged oceans to feed fish produced on factory fish farms, sometimes at a ratio of 20 to 1, in the form of fish, fish meal, and fish oil. And by the way, I can assure you that it's a very, very far cry from being humane. This is what I see behind the scenes at every single fish farm. There are now over 4 million fishing vessels in the world destroying ecosystems that have been in place for millions of years. Well, our rainforests are still being lost. 20 million acres just last year in the Amazon area alone. That's tragic. This is what a few thousand to a million-year-old rainforest now looks like, because the world's food priorities are still with eating livestock, not with being stewards of other living things, as we should be. This is the very sad result. Soon grass, pasture, and cattle will follow this in, usually erosion, desertification, and localized climate change as well. Last year, 7 million acres of rainforest in Malaysia and Indonesia were slashed and burned to grow palm oil, which isn't really all that healthy for us to eat. And by replacing primary rainforests, the biofuels generated from these palm plants are contributing more to climate change than the fossil fuels they're intended to replace, 65 times as much. And much of this is in Sumatra and Borneo. So there goes the last of the orangutans, as well as many other wonderful and quite innocent species. 80% of all rainforest loss is still due to raising cattle, with another 10% loss due to growing crops to feed them and other livestock. There's only 10% of rainforest loss due to local subsistence farming. And these livestock are grazing. It's not a matter of factory farming. We've already lost numerous ancient tribes, shaman, undiscovered medicinal plants, and millions of living things. We've lost over 90 tribes. We'll never see them again. They shouldn't be lost because of our inappropriate choice of foods. Well, it's quite easy to quantify our global depletion of land with far too much of it being used for the wrong purpose. And you can see it just about everywhere you go now. This is how much land is being used to raise livestock. In the U.S. alone, nearly 78% of all land is still being used for agriculture, is still used to support the animals that we eat. But listen to this. Okay, there are 100 million cattle in the U.S. today, 65 million pigs. Only 3% of all that's being pastured. Only 1% of all livestock in general, and yet we're still using this much land. As many of you know, you can produce 15 times as much protein from plants as you can from meat or animals on any given area of land. With spirulina and chlorella, it's 2,000 times more protein, if that's what you're concerned about, protein. You can produce 20 to 30,000 pounds of plant foods on 1 acre of land versus only 480 pounds at best of meat or animal products on 1 acre. And this is regardless of what the polyphase farm proponents will tell you. It's shocking knowing how much land on Earth is really used for raising animals, how inefficient this really is. There are 1 billion people suffering from hunger. This year alone, 6 million children will die from starvation. So really, how does this relate? 82% of the world's starving children live in countries where food surpluses are fed to animals that are then killed and eaten by more well-off individuals in developed countries like the US, UK, and in Europe. 1/4 of all grain produced by third world countries is now given to livestock. Now, to be sure, world hunger has many layers of complexity. One of the larger reasons is tied to poverty. But another significant factor is the looming shadow of our current demand to eat livestock and fish, which is indirectly tied to poverty. In fact, eating these animals ultimately affects food prices, food availability, certainly policy making, and even education to improve agricultural systems in developing countries, such as the Machakos region in South Kenya, which is not too far off or far away from these slums of Kibera here. Our food choices and production systems now have far-reaching effects, with most of our global resources trapped inside this livestock and fishing vacuum. In 2007, there was considered a record harvest of grain in the world, 2.1 billion tons. But over half of that was fed to animals in the meat and dairy industries. We can't blame, though, the recent drought in Russia or China or last year's flooding in Pakistan for the world's food security issues. It's true that little genetically engineered seed of corn or wheat or alfalfa that the Monsanto executives decided to produce, or ADM or Cargill, they may eventually affect a starving child in Africa or elsewhere. And the story seems to begin. It seems to begin with that little seed. And it winds its way through all of our current agricultural systems that result in manipulation of pricing and seriously inefficient global land use, producing food that's, of course, unhealthy for us and for our planet. But the story really doesn't begin with that little seed, and it doesn't really begin with Monsanto or their executives or with our government or with our subsidies. The story begins with all of us, because, of course, we're the ones requesting the end product. Global depletion of land encompasses a number of areas, but I think it's important to spend a minute or so on how our food choices are affecting biodiversity. Plants, animals, insects. We're losing other species on Earth at an unprecedented rate, with such a loss of biodiversity that we're finding ourselves in another era of large-scale extinction. But the previous 5 extinctions, well, they were caused by natural phenomena, whereas this one we're creating. And the question's why? And there are a few primary reasons. Unprincipled or poorly planned urban sprawl and pollution are certainly major factors, but so is something else. The World Conservation Union reported last year that most of the world's endangered or threatened species on their red list are suffering habitat loss due to livestock. Again, we want to make sure we get our words correct, not due to agriculture, due to livestock. And the situation is just as severe in our oceans. One animal extinction every 4 years used to be the norm. Today, we're witnessing over 30,000 animal extinctions each year. By the time today's over, just one day, there'll be another 82 animal species gone with it forever. The jaguar, very endangered due to loss of its habitat over the years, the unnecessary clearing of tropical rainforests to support cattle. Closer to home, there's the red wolf, declared extinct in 1980 due to hunting and loss of its habitat in order to raise livestock. But let's make sure we really all understand what's happening here, though. I'm going to summarize for you the loss of all predators on land over the last 100 years. I'm going to give you a recipe for how this happens. So, we all ready? We'll say you're ready. Okay, good. Okay, step number 1, we first take away their land. And we take away all the species that they prey on by clearing forests. Then step number 2, we dangle livestock in front of them, sort of come and get it style, the few predators that are left. And step number 3 is we shoot them. Yeah, we shoot them because, well, they're interfering with our livestock operations, and we can't have that. And that's pretty much the pattern of extinction of most species on land. There are not too many other valid ways to interpret it. The most recent convention on biological diversity was held in Nagoya, Japan last October as a follow-up to the one held in 2002. And here are the findings of the world's leading scientists, authorities, and policymakers on this subject. First, they found that none of their previous goals from 2002 were met. None of them, not one of them. So here's what they came up with for a new game plan. This is straight from Nagoya. I get to share my disappointment with you. They agreed to protect 17% of the remaining land in the world. So let's see now. We know that livestock are using a little less than 40% of the entire landmass on Earth. So their thought in Nagoya was leave all that alone, of course, and protect 17% of what's left over for the other millions and millions of species of living things. Okay, so that seems pretty good, and they weren't done yet, so they agreed to protect 10% of our oceans by the year 2020. Now, think about that. Not too hard. 9 years from now, we can all look forward to having 10% of our oceans protected. And also, there were no political and there were no economic motives established, and nations are allowed to police themselves. So is there any wonder why they're not making any progress there? Nearly all concerned researchers agree that the primary causes of rapid biodiversity loss that we're witnessing on our planet today is by pastured or grazing livestock on land, loss of habitat, and by unsustainable fishing practices in our oceans. And yet nowhere Nowhere in the resolution adopted by 196 countries is exact wording to effectively address this. Okay, well, the most pressing concern that we have today regarding sustaining our life and future life on Earth is, well, it's not the sudden loss of Facebook or Twitter, as many would think, although that would be devastating. It's our supply of water. We don't have much, and we're using all of it. Now, sure, it's a regional issue. We have flooding here and droughts there, but aquifers and wells are already drying up. There's a growing gap between worldwide demand for water and what's really available, with so much demand that there's expected to be a 40% shortage in water supply in just 19 years. And what you decide to eat has every single thing to do with this. Scientists are very concerned about water scarcity, but I think it's really more a matter of water management, isn't it? I mean, instead of focusing on technologies, we should be first looking at choices. Is this a good choice? How about these? Are any of these good choices? Do you know that it requires more than 400 gallons of water? That's more than 400 gallons of water just to slaughter one cow or one pig. And we slaughtered 145 million of them last year just in the U.S. Much of our water, our fresh water, is not fully renewable in our lifetime, and it's certainly not infinite in quantity. Okay, so how about some basics now? Has anyone here ever taken care of or babysat a cow or pig for a few days? Oh, well, I mean, I highly recommend it. It's a great experience. Then you'd know that the researchers are correct, that every cow really does need 20 to 30 gallons of water to drink each day. About 15 to 21 gallons just for one pig, and less than half that for a chicken, though. Now, this is important for everyone to know, because if someone wants to eat these things, they should certainly know what's going on behind the scenes. Versus 0 gallons for plants. Now, this is a non-irrigated scenario for both sides of the equation. So, just one of the billions and billions of livestock raised each year, just one drinks 70 times the amount of water that one of us would, or should, each day of its life. An area of tremendous misuse of water and land combined is right here in the state of California, where you use 900,000 acres of land to produce alfalfa. It used to be more than that. That's a staggering amount of land. How many here are actually from California? Okay, well, why do you do that? Oh, why do you do that? Because, on average, it requires 1 to 2 million gallons of water per year to irrigate just one of those 900,000 acres. It's very true. It's sadly very true. So guess where all that alfalfa and water in it's being used? Well, it goes to livestock, 5%. 5% goes to horses. The rest to livestock, 75% off to dairy cows. The average household in our country, according to the EPA, uses 50,000 gallons of water in 1 year. Indoor use, about the same outdoor. That's quite a bit of water, and it's what we're focused on in times of drought, how to reduce that. The average person in our country, though, consumes 210 pounds of meat in 1 year. It's actually a little bit more than that, but we'll go with that because that's what everybody's familiar with. It's 210 pounds of meat in 1 year, divided between 45 pounds of pig, 55 pounds of cow, and 110 pounds in growing each year of chicken, which equates to 315,000 gallons of water per person per year to support that meat diet. So now a more realistic view is that every household in the U.S., they really use 1 million gallons of water in 1 year. Not 50,000, 1 million gallons, and 95% of that water use is from their choice of food. So whenever there's a drought or water shortage anywhere in our country, which there are, does our government ever step up and declare a state of rationing meat or dairy? No, of course not. Well, why not, though? Why shouldn't they? Well, I think this illustration, hope you guys can see that. I think this illustration sums up the topic of pollution pretty well. A couple of bears dumping their waste back into the human house. Yeah, that's good. Called animal waste management. And pollution is a very important component of global depletion. We just don't have quite enough time. Over 90% of the world chooses food that's unhealthy for them and our planet, and there are a number of reasons for this. We've seen a clear suppression of information, lack of education or awareness, and much of this is influenced by the meat and dairy and fishing industries, of course. There's been a misplaced trust for guidance into the hands of individuals or organizations who are not aware of global depletion. Government subsidies have played a role. It's not as large as many would want you to think, but they have promoted the production of animal products. Remember, though, that less than 3% of all the government subsidies involve high fructose corn syrup. Currently, there's no accountability as to what resources it takes to produce our food, especially those from animals. And finally, there's a complex and quite powerful combination of psychological, cultural, social, economic, and political interactions. So, how do we solve all this instead of just listening to me up here complaining about it? Let's do some things. Okay, I think that nearly everything can be solved with education. That's why I wrote the book. That's why I'm writing another book, and that's why I'm lecturing at colleges and university with college students. School systems, beginning K through 12, and continuing right on through our higher academic institutions, I think should have required courses about this topic. And there should be a committee established at every school system, every corporation, every community who are creating opportunities for everyone to be enlightened about their food choices, especially hearing other perspectives. There's an obvious need to increase global awareness. And what I mean by local is to extend education to those specific geographic areas where there's misuse of land, water, or pollution. For instance, those living in rainforests need to be aware of how valuable their land is if left untouched, worth much more than the $43 an acre they're getting currently to raise cattle. Instead, the rainforest land could be used for sustainable growing of medicinal plants, like the rosy periwinkle, a little flower that gives us vincristine, used to treat childhood leukemia. And the rainforest land could also be used for ecotourism, such as being accomplished on the small island country of Dominica. We need to raise the educational base of those in mentoring capacities, make them more aware of global depletion. And this should include all political leaders, health practitioners, dietitians, community leaders, educators, CEOs, and parents. And we certainly need to reverse the trend of tiptoeing around this subject by the media and by other authors and lectures where we get most of our information from. An important part of our solution process will be the development of new agriculture systems. Community-supported agriculture and farm-to-table programs will need to be further developed, but they shouldn't obviously include animals, which they currently are. Globally, there are 3.3 billion people living in cities. Over 80% in the U.S. consider themselves urban dwellers, so all this is going to be very important. They're already growing food on porches, windowsills, and rooftops in New York City. You can't grow a cow up there. I don't think anyway. It's great to see. And buying local and being a locavore is important, but have you seen the recent study by Carnegie Mellon? Only 11% of all fossil fuel used throughout the food production process comes from transportation. So buying from local farmers isn't going to make much sense if you're still buying animal products. Small, local, organic, plant-based farms are going to need to proliferate, and some should be established as cooperatives. Now, I want to point out that every single grass-fed operation that I've visited or interviewed, every single one of them, firmly believes that factory farms are a necessity. Yeah, they do. They do, because they know how inefficient their own pastured animal operations really are, at least from one aspect, the land use standpoint. Even if you want to discuss the presumed need for animals, because of the natural spreading of manure, it's been very well documented by Rodale, Michigan State University, and others that green manure, meaning plants, crop rotation, cover crops, create much more fertile soil and with less erosion than if you use animal manure and grazing livestock. And we need to think seriously about what I call conversion permaculture. It's essentially a form of agroforestry where I think everyone's lawns should be converted to functional green spaces, natural habitats centered around a food-producing garden. I mean, it could be just one bean plant would be great, meaning no grass. Well, unless it's wheatgrass, of course. And we create incentives for complying, and you tax heavily if you don't. Of course, there's our upcoming and future Farm Bill and food policies. Okay, so why do you need to know anything about the Farm Bill? Well, a couple reasons. One is that you're paying for it in more ways than you can imagine. Let's make sure we're all somewhat on the same page about this bill. We won't go too much into it, but the current bill is a 5-year, $280 billion plan. It has 15 titles, each with its own set of funds. You're hearing about the $42 billion given as direct farm subsidies and another $46 billion in 2 other types of funds for various types of support, insurances, land set-aside programs. This is the grouping of funds that have supported industrial farming, but the other ones do too, in their own way. $190 billion, or 70% of the entire Farm Bill, is given to the 43 million people enrolled in the food stamp program, or SNAP. And that has serious issues as well. So, okay, what about the other 11 titles? Well, no one knows much about them because they don't have any money. But these are for titles like conservation, environment, forestry, renewable energy, and research. In order to move forward with the redrafting of this or any other future farm bill, which we'll keep hearing about, I think a few things need to be sorted out. I'm going to review just a couple of my thoughts. First, the food stamp program has no proper nutrition education and has no proper monitoring system. So the program itself is essentially contributing to our national health care problems and the continued production of unhealthy food. Since this is going to continue to be the largest part of the bill, it needs to be corrected at least as much as the other subsidy issues that everyone's so concerned about. Second, I think that all government funding should be only for those foods that are factually the healthiest for our environment and for ourselves. Organically grown, plant-based foods. You know what that means? That means there shouldn't be 1 penny going to any other type of food, period.
Yeah.
You got it. Absolutely. All right, you got it. Many of the major changes proposed for this bill are aimed at taking away economic support from factory farms, but giving more support to small farmers, thinking that's going to produce healthier food. It's not. It's not. Essentially, it's going to be shifting funds from large meat and dairy operations to small meat and dairy operations, and that begins to solve the agribusiness issues. But we're clearly going to have many small farm entities still producing unhealthy foods. So, in addition to some ideas I have in the Farm Bill, I have another solution dealing with accountability, which is going to get us on track much quicker, and it's what I call the eco and health risk tax. And here's how it would work. Okay, you're all familiar with the nutrition fact label, right? Okay, well, this happens to be ground beef or ground cow, something the average consumer would purchase, although many would rip right through that label and just eat whatever's on the inside without even reading it. But, right, we all know that. But on this label, you can see that half the calories are from fat, and most of those are from saturated fat, even a gram of trans fat, and quite a bit of cholesterol. Well, all that's not so good. But, bless you, but I don't see not so good anywhere on the label. Do you? No, I don't. Well, and there's also quite a bit of protein, but it's of the type of protein that's implicated in numerous disease states. And you certainly don't see what resources it took to produce whatever's inside that package. Well, consumers need to know what effect this product had on our environment while producing it, as well as what effect it'll have on our own health after consuming it. So, we introduced the eco and health risk factors. Now, in the event that these numbers are a little too complicated, which they could be, we put a little notation on the label or on the bag. It could say this, or it could say not so good, or it could say not a good choice, or in the future when all this becomes voice activated, yeah, a little voice could pop out and grab your hand, slap your hand and actually say, nah, I wouldn't do that if I were you. That's what it would say. Now this is all a good start, but it's most important to reflect these factors into costs. Now this is not a carbon tax, which would vastly understate the problem and therefore wouldn't work. It's a eco and health risk tax, something we've never done before, because the true cost to our environment and to our health has always been externalized. It's never been directly paid for with our heads always turned in the other direction. So here's the normal price of that previous package pulled off so you can see it a little bit better. And here are the new costs with the more appropriate eco and health risk factors applied. So now, instead of $3.89 a pound, that product is priced at over $12 a pound. Now I placed a 320% combined surcharge, which is being extremely lenient because I only factored in a fraction of the health risk and eco factors. Now, of course, this is going to generate a great deal of debate over quantification and how to lessen these new taxes before they even get started. But I would tend to go in the other direction. That's right. If someone starts asking too many questions, I just charge them more. Yeah. After all, I mean, how do you reflect the cost of loss of topsoil? Or 1,000 to 1,000,000-year-old rainforest, or ice age water, things that are invaluable. Okay, someday with a correct economic formulation and a more gutsy and proper policy change, we may even evolve to see this in our meat aisle, a quarter-pound beef patty, just one, priced at over $4,000, and it would be a steal at these prices if you had to go back and replace the resources that it took to produce it. Okay, so here we go. This is a question you're going to be confronted with sooner or later. It's one of the questions of our future. It's a topic that's gaining momentum, and I find it's a natural path for most people who want just so badly to hang on to the false sense of needing versus simply wanting to eat animal products. It's a path of least resistance, let's face it. So let's look at a couple different ways to answer this question. Well, there you have it. Can you see that? That's one way to answer it. Okay, and he's not alone. I mean, my thought is, though, is that we need to be fully aware of the consequences of our food choices, not partially aware. And we need to understand what we're doing to all areas of global depletion that I'm talking about. And we need to know the magnitude and the urgency of the problem. I mean, you know what? This is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem. I'm sorry to say that, but it's not. Oh, please don't get up and go. I didn't mean it. I'll take it back. No, I'm not going to take it back. And I did mean it. So let's take another look. Let's take a look at another way to answer that question, at how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. In many ways, greenhouse gases from all but nitrous oxide would actually increase, as methane production is 50 to 60% higher in grass-fed cattle and for a longer period of time, 2.5 years instead of 1 year. Regarding land use, this is very easy. It doesn't make much sense to use more than 34% of land that we're already using on Earth. You can ask all the other millions of species what their take is on that one. And we spent quite a bit of time discussing water already, so you know that raising grass-fed animals isn't so sustainable from that standpoint. And it'll have the same overall effect on depletion of our own health. What you've been hearing about the purported health benefits of grass-fed cattle, higher in omega-3s, lower in saturated fat, et cetera, is quite misleading, because what they're doing is they're comparing it to grain-fed beef, not to plants. Go ahead and compare it to asparagus or broccoli, and then come back and tell me how healthy it is. 100 years ago, when everybody wants us to go back and eat what our great-grandmothers were eating, 100 years ago, back in 1910, when everyone in the U.S. had been eating their fair share of grass-fed cattle, and long before the commercialization of food occurred, long before high-fructose corn syrup, the leading cause of death back then, just ahead of tuberculosis, was, guess what? It was heart disease, just like it is today, from eating too much saturated fat, too much cholesterol, and the type of protein from all those grass-fed animal products, and not enough fiber, nutrients, phytonutrients, or even anti-angiogenic substances that can only be found in plants. So then, this is another food term. This is another one that's being misused, which is the word sustainable. What authors, lecturers, people who used to be on Oprah, what they really mean, what they were really thinking when they use this word is this: I think it's okay to do it this way. Or very possibly they could be thinking this works for me, when in fact it may not be sustainable at all. Most CEOs of any large corporation today, they'll pull out a long list of things this word means to them. They'll have to. But they're going to be thinking this: food? Yeah, I wasn't aware that food even had a role. Meaning they may be doing the best they can in all other areas of sustainability, energy, waste, economic, but how much attention have they given to food choice in implementation or education? So, would that qualify them and their businesses or institutions as sustainable? No, it would not. It's time now to go to the very essence of this whole problem. If we gave everyone in this room 1 acre of land to grow any food you choose, what would you grow? What should you grow? Well, at all my college and university lectures, the students all then know what they want to grow. I haven't figured out what that is yet. What is that? Yeah, they all ask me if they can grow this, marijuana. And I tell them, sure, it's a great idea. It probably should be the male hemp plants, very nutritious. And remember, we're talking about food here. Well, on this 1 acre that we give you, you could raise 1 grass-fed cow, just like many would want you to, thinking it's fully sustainable, just like that New York Times best-selling author does. But in most areas of the world, 1 acre is not going to be enough. You're going to need 5, 10, even up to 20 acres. So you'd have to go next door and you have to borrow some land from your neighbor. You're already off on the wrong foot. Or you could go this route. You could plant on just half your acre this, kale. Yeah, or any one of a number of thousands. It could. Or any one of a number of thousands of different plants to choose from. Kale has an amazing assortment of micro and macronutrients. In fact, kale has over 45 different, thus far, recognized phytonutrients. Each one of these, individually, will increase your immune response, help reduce the likelihood you'll develop cancer, and provide you with many important anti-inflammatory properties. You can't find any of these phytonutrients in your cow. Kale has a perfect ratio of omega-3 fatty acids, and it has fiber. And when looking at global growing applications, how very cool is this? Kale will actually continue to grow through extremes of temperature, from -5 degrees all the way through 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, and after you pick the leaves, does anybody know what happens? New ones grow back. New little kale leaves grow. I bet your cow can't do that. Yeah, it's amazing. And on the other half an acre that you have left over, you could plant this, quinoa, or you could plant any one of a number of thousands of different plants. It's another power food that provides a gluten-free source of protein, a balanced and complete amino acid profile. It's quite healthy. So there you have it. If you used your 1 acre plus borrowed land for grass-fed livestock, you'd end up with 100 to 400 pounds of a type of food that's implicated in numerous disease states. And along the way, you've produced 3 to 4 tons of methane and carbon dioxide, and you've used 20 to 30,000 gallons of water. In most cases, you're going to use 1 million to 2 million gallons of water for that one cow. Or instead, if you used your acre of land to grow something like kale and quinoa, you've produced 15,000 pounds of food that's infinitely healthier for you to eat and for our planet to grow. Any of you like tomatoes? Lycopene and all? Sure. Well, you could sliver off and use just 1/8 of your acre in the period, and you could grow 30,000 pounds of them on that little eighth of an acre in the period of time it takes to grow your cow over 2.5 years. With all the kale and quinoa and tomatoes, you could feed yourself and your family and your neighbors, and you could even have a few thousand pounds of wonderful food left over. So you know what you could do? You could box up some of that food and you could send it to all those starving children in Ethiopia. It can be done. It's quite an amazing difference, isn't it? And now imagine extrapolating that model out, or variations thereof, in terms of global use of our resources. And now answer that question about how sustainable raising grass-fed livestock really is. That's what I'm asking him. I didn't last very long there. Okay, so it's time to go back to that very first photo that we saw that's not Brazil, okay? You need to know that this is in the northeast section of Victoria, Australia, where I was researching the ecological effects of their food choices. And instead of seeing blue skies and green grass and rolling hills and things like that, I like taking a closer look at things like this. So here's what I see in that photo. I see this: depletion of land, air, food, water, inefficient use of our resources. It's happening there as quickly as anywhere else in the world. But I also see something else, which is the main reason that I visited this specific area to research. Now, lock in this view for just a moment, please. We're all going to just take a walk, and we're going to walk down the road just a few hundred yards, literally. And this is what we see. This 1,000-year-old forest is what that cattle ranch used to be. And it's the home to numerous insects, plants, animals. There are 3 different types of eucalyptus trees growing here, and one animal in particular that I was looking for, which is now endangered due to destroying its home. It's this little guy. All of his family members were killed. Thousands each year are. He now lives in a small, remote rescue area in that forest, and he represents species everywhere on our planet that are being devastated by cattle or other livestock operations on land, fishing in our oceans, lack of awareness about food choice, which is propelling all of this, and politics. In fact, koalas are predicted to become extinct in just 20 years by those very few researchers and kind caretakers who are close to this situation. It's quite sad. And that's what I see in that very first photo, which, now that I think about it, actually does have something to do with Brazil, after all, and Russia, and China, and the US, and nearly every other country in the world now, doesn't it? Okay, so when I mentioned that our global depletion due to food choice is not a go meatless on Monday type of problem, this is what I mean. I mean that it's not enough. We need to be constantly aware that if your food choice involves animals, that means all livestock, grass-fed or not, and fish. It's the driving force behind global depletion, and it's very, very real, and therefore it needs to be dealt with correctly. For instance, you've all heard that we need to vote with our forks, right? Yeah, we've all heard that, right? Vote with your forks. Well, don't do that. No, don't do that, because it's something we've been doing for the past 50 years, and look where it's gotten us. I mean, let's give ourselves more credit than that and actually become more aware of our food choices, and then vote with our minds first, and then let our forks follow. Certainly then it'll become forks over knives, much easier, I think. When you go to the farmer's market, let the local farmers know that you support them. Let them know that you want organically produced food, nothing that comes from raising animals, because that uses too much land and water and affects our atmosphere and our health. But let them know this. Guide them, influence them. Again, you're going to be voting with your minds first, not your forks. Now, about the Go Meatless on Monday campaign. If you do this, if you go meatless on Mondays, you'll be contributing to global warming, pollution, global depletion of our planet's resources, and your own health on only 6 days of the week. Instead of 7. You'll be creating a false justification for your actions on those other 6 days. In other words, let's not rest on the laurels of what you're doing right only 1/7 of the time. And 2 little buddies discussing global depletion. We've seen tremendous progress lately with increased public awareness of all the ill effects of factory farming, haven't we? Yeah, and as a start, this is a good thing. But make no mistake that for every bit of progress this seems to be, there's an equally strong message tagging insidiously along with it, telling everyone that it's perfectly fine to continue raising, slaughtering, and eating billions and billions of animals. Only now, instead of with factory farms, we can accomplish it by using pastures, small family farms, and our oceans. And better yet, we can use the word sustainable now to hide behind. That's the message that we're all hearing. What we don't hear, of course, is that we're still hurting all the animals, our planet, and ourselves. So for all the millions and millions of people that are being told that grass and that fish and grass-fed livestock are sustainable and healthy and humane, there needs to be a louder and clearer voice telling them that it's not. One quick word about this photo. Okay, so Turkey thinks that she's a Newfoundland. And the Newfoundland, well, he knows quite a bit about Thanksgiving and what to do with turkeys, because that's his lifelong best friend. And baby steps. Okay, what are those? I mean, I think it's time we do away with baby steps because we're in fact not babies, are we? I mean, if you think about it, all of us are quite capable of taking big person steps right now. And our planet and all the animals shouldn't have to wait with repeated and ongoing assaults until we get that figured out. There's a great opportunity for all of us to have a leading role in creating change. Ears are starting to perk up and listen. Minds and doors are starting to open. And this is just the beginning. And that's what I see. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The time has never been clearer for the world to change to a plant-based diet. It's also never been clearer that the vegetarians in our society, all those independent, sensitive, and keenly aware individuals, well, the time is perfect for you to have the responsibility and the honor of guiding non-vegetarians toward a healthier and more peaceful path, because after all, you know the way, just like Solomon here. And speaking of the way, here's a very brief visual summary of every single thing we just talked about. So all eyes on the screen one last time, please. So let's all commit to making a difference, but not just with our own health or with our own life. Let's commit to making a difference in someone else's life, and let's commit to making a difference in the long-term health of our planet. Let's, all of us, inspire others to become aware. Thank you so very much. Thank you. It's been a fantastic weekend, and it's certainly been my privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.